Welcome to the Shared Practices podcast. This is a repeat guest. We've had him on the show multiple times, even recently. Jayme Amos. If you are here because you're interested in startups, perfect. If you're thinking, man, I'm really not thinking about startups right now. This is not what I'm interested in. Stick around. This we talk about opportunities versus opportunism in a crisis and what people have been able to do in the context of a startup. So if you're a startup person, you're in the right place. But also the purpose behind your practice and the give and the heart of your practice. And I don't think we can overhit on this topic. I think this is fundamental to uh, being successful in multiple dimensions on your practice. And if we beat this horse over and over, every single time I get energized by it. And I think with an acquisition, which we tend to have more acquisitions in our podcast, um, this is harder to do. It's harder to retrofit and requires more effort and work. But every single time you hear about it, every single time you hear his perspective, it sinks in a little bit deeper, and it does that for me as well. So you're really going to enjoy this. We really highlight the opportunities that have occurred during COVID-19 for startups in particular. But you can also look at that overall as what opportunities do you have and what purposes do you have for your practice. So enjoy this interview. I'll catch you on the back end with Jayme Amos. Welcome to the Shared Practices podcast. I have a good friend and distinguished guest with me today who the two of us narrowly missed some potential COVID excitement in Boston a few months ago. Welcome back to the show, Jayme Amos. How are you doing?
Thank you, thank you, thank you. It's awesome to be here. I'm great, thanks. But first of all, I should clarify. Number one, there's two things I should clarify. Number one, it's an incredible honor for you to call me friend and to say to have me back again. That's pretty awesome. We've been able to spend a lot more time together this year, traveling and talking and preparing and strategizing together. So that's awesome. But number two, I should clarify. You said distinguished guest. That I have to take umbrage. Is that the word umbrage?
That's a $5 word. I don't know if that's allowed here.
I take issue or umbrage or yeah, I don't know about distinguished, but thank you. This is awesome. Super happy to be back, and I'm excited to get some people fired up with some ideas that we see working around the country now. So speaking around the country, yeah, you and I kind of dodged a couple of COVID worries as we were dashing around the country earlier this year.
Well, it was a lot of fun. I was so grateful to be able to go to Boston with you and Steven and, meet everyone at Tufts and how, excited the student population was there. Had a lot of fun. It was interesting. I was actually reflecting on some of the things that I said to some of those students, about practice ownership and the risks inherent to practice ownership, and including some things, even, uh about financing. One of the things that, Stephen brought up was that usually banks want you to have a little bit of cash on hand, 5, 10%, preferably of the purchase price or of the startup. Not as a down payment, but so that when there are bumps in the road, that you've got a buffer. And I remember saying to those students, you know what, sometimes you can still get financing without that buffer. And I kinda, like, wanna take those words back. Like, I wanna say, even if you can, do not get financing unless you have a buffer, because you don't know when, the world's gonna collapse on you, and
Yeah.
having a few months' expenses on hand, it could be the difference between cracking and thriving.
There's a lot of things we can do in life, right? Like we can eat Twinkies all day if we wanted to. Like we can. It doesn't mean it's good for us.
Right.
Yeah, for a startup in particular, that cushion, like you called it, obviously now it's more recognizably necessary or beneficial than maybe ever in the history of dentistry. Uh, but also, I mean, there are even like misunderstood things with startups. I'll pick out another one related to financing. There's even some things we could do that you shouldn't. Like some banks will say, "Oh, don't you worry, you don't need a business plan." And listen, can you technically open your doors without a business plan? Sure. Like you don't.
Right.
There's no like startup gods who say, "No, thou shalt not open your doors without a business plan." But I don't know. The most successful startups I've ever seen have always had a business plan. So
Right.
it's almost like it's really important that all associate dentists who are stepping into practice ownership, that they don't just consider what has been done, but what is best. Not
Mm.
just not just what they could get away with, like the Twinkies. Like it's not just about could I eat Twinkies? It's but wait, I've got one shot to do this. I've got one chance to get this right. This is going to be for the rest of my career. This is going to be to provide for my family. How do I make sure I do it right? So Twinkies in this story, I think, are sometimes you could relate Twinkies to things like maybe stereotypical Facebook advice, like here's a poll from 100 people who've only had mediocre success with a startup, and they have all these strong opinions. So you could take the Twinkie from the poll, or or you could try to focus on what actually is best, not just what which Twinkies have been ingested. So yeah, startup business plans, startup funding. There's a lot of Twinkie style
You
discussions out
could,
there.
but should you? Yeah. And this is for those who haven't figured this out already. This episode is kind of a throwback to season 3. So this is not a leadership culture change. We already did that. We did an episode on that, Jayme and I, a few episodes back. This is like a startup inspiration, startup possibilities during COVID, post COVID, ownership mindset moving forward despite potential risks and question marks. And I wanted to get Jayme on because there have been some amazing things I've been hearing from you about what you've been able to do with the knowledge and the leverage and the expertise that you have on hand to take advantage of the opportunities afforded. Not take advantage of a situation in a weird way or a negative way, but there are banks and real estate and opportunities that are here because of the current economic climate. And what you do with that depends a lot on your knowledge and your ability to execute. So, do you have any tales that you want to share with us of things during COVID? I felt my heart went out to anyone in the middle of an acquisition, in the middle of a startup, in the early days of a startup. Um, and then I started hearing some of your tales, and I was like, okay, wow, there actually are people that are kicking butt right now. So, what do you have
Yeah,
for it?
yeah. I think it is important, like you talked about with opportunities. As I'm thinking through a couple of stories that I'm excited to share. In those, I think it's important to recognize there are opportunities that can be captured, but there's also opportunism. And
Mm,
there's a difference between opportunities and opportunism. Opportunism is taking advantage of someone else's negative situation. Opportunities is seeing an opportunity and taking hold of it before it slips away. I've got two kids. My daughter is a tween and she's not in any sports. But
sure.
as soon as this quarantine COVID stuff happened, at least where I live, we had what I think is the most restrictive quarantine in the United States, and we were literally legally not allowed to leave our property,
Oh
like
my goodness.
by law, technically by edict or whatever they call it. Like we weren't allowed to leave our like real estate.
Confines, yeah.
It was like you were allowed to like if you had to go to the airport or you had to like go to the grocery store, go to the doctor's appointment, and that was it. Boom, done. So my daughter, who's never really been much of a sportsaholic or anything, one of the things that she committed to do was run 44 miles for this kind of national running thing. Well, she looked at her limitations like, shoot, I can't run very far. But my wife and my son and my daughter, they came up with this plan and they tracked and counted the distance around the perimeter of the property. And I don't remember what it is, but let's say it's, let's say 20 laps equals a mile. I don't remember the math, but they fought hard through week 1 of the quarantine, and they're like, "Oh, this is super boring," but past the car, around the side of the house, back around the yard, around the car, past the house, around the yard. All three of them did it, and my son and my daughter both achieved their 44-mile challenge, which is so
Wow.
cool. Like they've never done it before. So my wife, she got like chalk, like sidewalk chalk, and she drew up on the wall, "I made it," and a big chalk drawing, 44 miles. And such an awesome accomplishment. Like at their age, even my age, I've never run 44 miles. Like, come
Right.
on. That's not hard for somebody like you in the military with boot camp and stuff like that. Like you do that in an afternoon, but not me, not my kids. But they did it. And I think that's one of the special opportunities that maybe we're all finding in this reality. We could just sit on the couch and say, woe is me. And I understand if some people get stuck there. I totally understand. My heart breaks for them. But there are also legitimate opportunities that are these windows of time that will close. And I bet, like my prediction, like mark this on your calendar, look back at it a year from now. I predict we will all look back at these last couple months with fond memories. Like I know some of us have lost loved ones, some of us have gone through some really difficult health challenges and such. I get it. That's true. But I think in many ways we're going to look back and say, look at those opportunities we had. Look at what we did together. And my kids literally have 44 miles written on the wall now to commemorate that. And I think it's like that with startups right now. I think a lot of doctors are scared, like I'm not allowed to leave my property, so to speak. But I know I still want the control. I know I still want to be a practice owner, but what are the possibilities now? Has everything changed? So you asked about stories. There's a guy that I love. This guy, his name is David. Um, David came to one of our courses. It's called the Startup Practice Blueprint. He came to this course and he met our team and he applied for our program and it looked like a great fit. So we kind of marched arm in arm with him through this 18-month journey to get his startup open. Well, wouldn't you know, for David, almost like out of a storybook, like this guy dreams big back 18 months ago. His target opening date is 2 months into the quarantine, like 60 days into it. Almost worst case scenario, like you just said. Oh,
Oh, oh,
oh,
oh.
oh, yeah. So that sounds bad, but it gets worse because David, uh, he was supposed to open on a Thursday. Earlier in that week, he got an email from his boss that said, "Hey, practice is slow. You've been a great associate, but you're done. Got to let
Ooh.
you go." And to frame his situation even more, he and his wife at the time were 60 days away from having their second child.
Okay.
So his wife is pregnant with their second child. He just lost his job and he's about to open a startup in the worst, like scariest time in dental history. So David goes to open his doors, and what I'm so freaking proud of is he stuck to it. Like we built out a plan over 18 months. Like he stuck to the plan. He's like, "Are you guys sure? Like this is freaking nuts." We spent 4 to 6 months just planning out the marketing strategies alone. That alone. His first day one in startup practice ownership was a $4,300 day. Cold
Wow.
scratch startup in the middle of a freaking pandemic. Now listen, $4,300 is not like world setting for an established like 5-year-old mature practice, but let's put this in perspective. $4,300, $4,200 of production in a practice, that is mathematically higher than the national average for established practices. And he busted through that number on his first day with a cold scratch startup. So that's why I like to say when things are built out right, maybe we go back to the other discussion. When we remove the Twinkies,
Right.
some really cool things can happen. So I've got lots of stories like this, but I can tell you, I mean, Richard, you and I both know the person who comes to my mind right now. There's a way to do it wrong, and there's a way to like really, really get burned in
Mm.
practice ownership. Uh, I'll leave this person. I don't have the person's permission, but you know this woman. You and I met her together not too long ago. Maybe I can circle back and see if she's will allow me to read this with her name on it. But I'll just paraphrase what she emailed me. June 18th. So what's that? I don't know. Was that last week?
Yeah.
Yeah, last like Thursday or whatever. Okay, so she says here, hope you're doing great. I want to sincerely apologize for dropping the ball. She's connected with a lot of younger dentists. Blah blah blah. We saw each other in March, and look at what the last blah blah blah. Okay, so now she gets to the point. She says, "I have a question that maybe you or your business partner can get looped in on. I have a student who graduated from X just a couple years ago, who was breaking even with her startup when COVID-19 hit. She's in the process of losing everything and about $675,000 in debt between the PAN, the office, etc., that she borrowed to get things set up. Her finance guy, here comes a Twinkie. Her finance guy suggested her only option was personal bankruptcy. I know there are a lot more private options out there that she isn't aware of. I'm wondering if you or your team might be able to help her, if there's any way that you can help out. Additionally, maybe helpful for you to know that she's on that might be helpful for her to attend one of your courses or something. She could use this experience. The $675,000 does not include student loans of $575,000. So she is in deep. Anything you can offer would be greatly appreciated. And then she says, I know it's a day late and a dollar short, but let me know if it's something you can help with. Oh,
Ugh.
that like hurts me when I hear that people put it all on the line. They don't have the right systems in place or the strategies in place. And she's literally being told by her advisors that bankruptcy is the only viable option. Like,
Mm.
oh, this is probably I don't know who this person is, but she's probably a good, kind, caring person who's trying to do right by her patients. And, and candidly, it doesn't have to be like that. I can give you name after name, client after client who had like 1 or 2 or 3 months after opening day before COVID started, who were $5 or $10 or $15,000 days after COVID. There's
Mm.
some incredible opportunities that are not opportunism, and we can talk through some of them if it would be intriguing to you and your audience. But opportunities right now are massive for startups when they're done the right way, without slipping in the opportunism category. And these opportunities, one of them, my goodness, this guy Andrew in Florida, we just scored him a negotiation on his lease. This is one of the special opportunities for associates considering startups. Ready? If you're an associate and you're listening to this, write this down. Right now, I am confident that we're about to see the best deals in the history of the country on real estate for startups. I'm 100% sure. I'm not saying every deal will be, but we just finished negotiations for a guy in Florida. He now has 30 free months of rent. That's 2.5 freaking years. That's 2.5 years of not writing a rent check. Like, imagine what that would do
Wow.
for your confidence and for your wallet and your
Yeah.
ability to reinvest back in your team or give you a bigger cushion. 30 months right now. Now, this is not necessarily good news for landlords, but the reality is there are some, like, pizza joints and barbershops and nail salons. Some of them aren't going to make it. I'm going to make no mistake about it. There will be some economic, financial mess in these coming months, but our country will bounce back. Our economy will come back. This whole pandemic thing is going to be bookended. It will be bookended. It will end, whether it's through a vaccine or not, like whatever it is, it will
Right.
end. It will
Right.
come to a close. The economy will come crushingly, roaringly back stronger than ever before. I'm 100% sure that they will come beautifully for a startup. All you need is 18 months. You need 18 months to prepare.
Mm.
12 to 18 months is the window. So what we have seen is through this whole process, you start today and you take about 18 months to get going. In this 18 months right now, there are insane opportunities, like free rent, like construction savings. That's not, like I said, that's not great news for landlords necessarily, but that provides an opportunity. That's not taking advantage of someone. It's just capturing a reasonable, legitimate, high integrity opportunity for your future and for your family and to serve your patients in your future community. So
Well, and
anyway, I didn't mean to talk quite so long, but I get fired up about this stuff. So I hope that gives some ideas.
that was fantastic. And to also reframe this for landlords, I mean, they want long-term, stable, essential clients. They want people who are gonna survive whatever version of whatever comes next, and dentistry offers that stability to landlords, and so that's the reason that they're willing to make these deals is like, "Man, I've got businesses that have question marks all over them, but I know that dentistry, despite PPE costs, despite all the fears, despite all these things, there is enough cushion in dentistry that if you're doing things right, you've got a blueprint, you're making non-Twinkie decisions that, you're gonna be a great tenant. So even, for landlords, they are willing to make these deals because they get a great long-term tenure client that can be an anchor for them in their, dubious real estate holdings at that point. So,
Yeah.
um
tricky thing though is in one thing I'd encourage everybody to remember is that cost savings with a startup or any version of practice ownership, cost savings is not the goal. It's not the goal. That could be a byproduct of implementing the vision and the strategy correctly, right? That could be part of a strategic maneuver. But I have actually seen some people a couple of years ago. I remember a guy who was kind of bragging all over social media. Hey, I got this awesome grant. I finally chose where to put my practice because the city was willing to give me a $50,000 grant. Like, whoa, dude, that sounds cool. 50 grand.
Wow.
That's
Wow.
awesome. You got a
Yeah.
grant. That means free money. Like, gift from Uncle Sam, 50 grand. That's cool. I called him a couple, maybe 18 months later, so, a year and a half later. Hey, how's it going? He said, oh, I don't know. I don't know if we really, I don't know if we're going to keep this practice. I said, oh, I
Ooh.
thought you had something good going on. What's up? He's not one of our clients, just a guy I know. He said, well, after opening the place up, my wife and I realized that we really don't feel comfortable going there. Maybe we need to wear a bulletproof vest or something to feel better, but we don't really like it. Like,
Oh,
oh,
very Italian.
whoa, yeah, one of those places. So that could be the really awful trapped reality of making a decision for the sake of cost savings. Cost savings will not lead to a smart business decision. The cost savings can be the byproduct of a smart business decision, ceteris paribus, all other things being equal. Like if there's a cost savings there and you have two good choices, go for the cheaper one. Sure, that's great. But don't, please. If you find 30 free months of rent, or if you take the months of negotiations like we do to get there, don't let that be the deciding factor, because you got a whole career ahead of you. A whole career ahead of you that needs to be guided properly, not just some cost savings between here and there. So if that gives some
Well, and I
clarity.
wanted to go back. There was one thing that, you said with your earlier story with the I can't remember if it was David in Florida, um,
Andrew's in Florida. Yeah.
Andrew, sorry,
Yeah.
who had his opening date into the pandemic, into the
David.
lockdown.
Yeah, that one's David.
That one's David. Okay, okay. So, he was probably, I'm guessing, he had a marketing budget and
Mhm.
was marketing through this.
Yeah.
Was
Mhm.
there was money going out the door, and
Uh-huh.
you guys did not hit the red, like, abort button
Uh-huh.
on that marketing plan.
Yep.
So that's where having the plan overall, having the budget overall, and having allocated these things, not so that it's just cost savings and we're not spending any money and therefore we're gonna be successful, um, but then having the fortitude and the support and the encouragement to follow through with that plan despite all of the question marks are
Mhm.
what yields an immediate first day higher than national average, practice opening. So I want you to inject a little bit of that, um, confidence in moving forward at this point. So someone who
Mhm.
is thinking, okay, 18 months from now, I'd like to have my own practice. I'd like to have an opening day. And, I'm just not sure right now. I don't know. Is this thing gonna bounce back? Is it practice ownership worth it? Um, what would you say to that person who knows that they want practice ownership? Practice ownership isn't the question mark. It's, is a startup still worth it? Is this economy, is all these fears, um, do you have any more proof or any more stories of people who, opened a few months ago or, opened and then COVID hit,
Yeah.
3 months before that? Do you have any clients that have kinda survived this despite having opened previous to that?
Yeah. Some record-setting awesome stories. I could read a couple. I was going to help answer the question with a clarification that thankfully I appreciate it you just gave. The clarification being, this is for the people who know they want to become practice owners. It's
Right.
for the people who know they want that. I'm not here to talk anybody into becoming a practice owner. But if you're one of those people who says, you know what, I'm kind of getting tired of not having the control. I want to I want to do what I want to do, and I want to practice what I want to practice. I want to attend the CE that I want to attend. I want to set my
Right.
own hours. I want to build this around my family's lifestyle. Cool. Like, Cool, that's you. Great. A startup could potentially be a great option. I'll tell some stories here too, but I think if anyone's thinking through that, I want you to think through the potential of a startup with three different possibilities. We call them the three Ps. You could take this and use it. The three Ps are very powerful to focus your prioritization. The first P, if you imagine, if you're listening from an audio perspective, imagine a ladder, like a 3-step staircase, going from bottom left to upper right. So imagine this 3-step staircase. Real simple stick figure drawing. The first lowest step on this ladder, the staircase, the lowest step should represent practice. The second step should represent profits. And the third step should represent purpose. So practice, profits, purpose. These are the three Ps. This is a three Ps framework for opening a startup properly. So with practice, if you're thinking about opening a practice, you've got to get open, right? So you do need a practice. Inside the practice component, this is where you hear a lot of people, like on social media, kind of geek out on things like the equipment negotiations or the demographics report or those kinds of things. All of that has to be done properly. Like if you don't open your practice properly, you're going to be set off on the wrong foot. For example, if you open in the wrong town where you need to wear a bulletproof vest and you were attracted because of the wrong reasons,
right?
That's an egregious example. But if you do that, those things are not undoable. You don't undo those. Like you don't just put your practice on wheels after you sign a lease and then move to a different side of town. That doesn't happen. So they're not really changeable. That's practice. So practice has to be done well. I don't want to make light of it, but most startup practice owners, they kind of look at that as the goal. Like, I want to get open. I want to have a practice. I want to protect you and I want to caution you. If you're listening to this, don't let that be your goal. The goal is not, if you're taking notes, write this down. The goal is not to open for business. That is not the goal. Your priority cannot be, I need to get to that finish line. I need to open for business. Wrong. You'll be, world of hurt if you do that. The goal is not to open for business. The goal instead is to have a business that then opens. It was wildly different. So there's open for business, like, hey, I have chairs in my building. I signed a lease. I opened the doors. Oh, crap. What do I do now? And it happens all the time. Instead, build the business first, then open. How do you do that? Well, that's where profits comes in. So the first level of the staircase is practice. That means we call this the 13 stages, by the way. Richard, you and I were just talking about our masterclass. We have an audio masterclass. It's in podcast form, but whatever. It's on a podcast format. If anybody wants to get a free copy of it, it's startupdentistpodcast.com. We go through the entire 13 stages sequence of the practice journey, going from idea to opening day with a practice that has great purpose behind it. That we call that the 13 stages. So in that masterclass, startupdentistpodcast.com, you can go hear the entire process. But if we don't focus before opening day on the business of a startup, we call this the Startup MBA. It's a very defined system of opening, all the protocol, the processes, the financial guidelines, the scheduling protocol, the hiring, the marketing strategies, the publicity efforts to get tens of thousands of dollars of free publicity before your opening day. That's called profits, the profits step on this 3-step staircase. In the profits section, this is where, in all seriousness, this is where and how, at least the startups that I work with, this is how they can open confidently. Because it's almost like they have all this, it's almost like having a catapult. Remember the catapult from back in the days of castles and knights and kings, right? So you exert all this energy and force trying to pull this catapult thing backwards and down. I'm acting it out in front of my.
Yeah, too bad you guys don't get the video here. There's a lot of effort going on right now.
I'm really going for it.
Yeah.
You got to tie this sucker down, and it's hard. You got to pull it back and tie it down. You have to have proper straps, and it takes a long time and a lot of effort to tie this sucker down. But then it's all this built up force. It's built up energy. When you cut that rope, it's boom, it's game on, and this boulder comes shooting out of it, and it comes out with so much force that it can break an entire castle wall. That is what it's like when you do the profits stage the right way. You're building all this energy. You're creating momentum before the doors come bursting open. That's the profits section. Startup MBA, hiring, marketing systems for the business. There's a misnomer, there's a total misunderstanding in the DIY startup circle in dentistry, and it's it's so sad. David Maloley and I were just talking about this. Dr. Dave.
Oh yeah.
So David Maloley and I were just talking about this. He said, it's really hard to see many of my colleagues focus on hustle and grit. I said, whoa, I think I feel the same way, but elaborate. What do you mean? And I'll butcher his words. He's very eloquent. He was alluding to the fact that the answer to grow a practice is not just hard work. I mean, if you think about like going on a long run, back to a running analogy, if you think about going on a long run, you could be running around a track and working really hard to get around this track, and you're working your tail off. One day you might wake up and say, oh no, I ran the wrong direction.
Right.
Like the hustle and the grit is not the solution. It's the strategy, it's the vision and the pre-planning. That's why I implore of people, don't focus on the practice piece at the expense of having the profits component pre-planned. But then above everything else, the priority from my perspective is the third category, the third level, which is purpose. So practice, profits, purpose. Purpose it beats everything by far. With proper purpose, that could sound really fluffy, but Richard, you and I have talked about that. And when you really grasp what it is, and when you really grasp how to weave that into the DNA of the practice, when you really grasp how to motivate your team with real purpose, they're there for purpose, not paycheck. When you sincerely understand, like, wait a minute, no matter how much money I make, I'm not going to enjoy this unless I feel like I'm realizing a calling, or I feel like I'm living out my purpose. It doesn't matter how much money I'm making at the end of the day. Right. I mean, we have that threshold, but purpose is what matters. Purpose motivates us. Purpose serves the community. Purpose serves our team. Purpose serves the people we actually serve. And then purpose makes us more fired up to show up every day and do what we do with excellence.
Yeah.
So when I say purpose, I talk a lot about clients who say things like, Dr. Brian, one of the guys you and I know quite well, Brian, he's in right outside of Nashville. He says, with every new patient who comes to our practice, we help fund the needs for a family of a child with special needs right here in our community. And he says, we do that because when I was a young boy, I remember losing my baby sister to a special needs condition, and my family really, really struggled. They hurt, and it tore us in many ways. He says, I don't want to see anyone like it in our community struggle the same way I did, which is why with every new patient who comes to our practice, we help fund the financial needs of a family of a child with special needs. So, and now for him, he's told me, even just in the last few months, he said, Jayme, it's crazy. You're right. Like by weaving this all together before we opened, by weaving it all together, he said, now I think I have team members who are more fired up for this purpose than even I am.
Right.
Which is so powerful, because then like with a startup, this is the part that like I hope everybody listening grabs onto. Like with a startup, this becomes your stage. This is like your great moment of potential performance when you can impact an entire community, thousands and thousands of people, as a true dignified community leader. That doesn't mean you need to be like a Tony Robbins or like a pulpit speaking person. But it does mean that you have a chance to impact people's lives, not just their occlusion, like their lives through your whole town can be impacted if you set it up the right way. To Maloley's point, you could fight and struggle with a DIY hustle and grit mentality. You can get there 5, 10, 15 years. I'm not saying you won't, but why not set it up so you can enjoy it on day one? So I love the numbers stories, like the 4,200, the 4,300 on day one, the $5,000 first days we're seeing. The fact that our clients get on front pages of newspapers, standing in front of their buildings weeks before they open, like publicity you'd kill for.
Right.
They're for free, by the way. I'd love to tell you the numbers are all that matters, but it's not. Like what really matters is how much you're accomplishing, how at the end of your career you can look back and say, look what we did together, not just look at our demographics ratio. So
right.
So practice, profits, purpose. So if anybody is on that fence thinking about is now still a good time, only if you do it right, or you're going to end up like my friend, the email I just read. You're going to end up with a much higher likelihood of things going in a bad way. So set it up right the first time, so you can enjoy it at the highest level.
And you only have one career. You only have one chance to be a dentist and to impact the world and benefit other people. And even if you've realized, okay, the last 5, 10 years of my career, I've not been fulfilling my potential. I've not been focused on a purpose that I care about more than just providing for my family, which is a great purpose in and of itself.
Yep.
But there's more to be had, and there's more more good that can be done. In
Yeah.
particular, so we talk about running. This summer, I have a good friend in Germany who is an army dentist, Captain Caleb Stott, and he challenged me and my other friend, Dr. Hunter Bennett, to do a running challenge, and it was going to be 100 miles in 6 weeks. And then Hunter invited his wife, Lacey, to the challenge, and she proceeded to kick our butts. Every single day, I would post my run. We were tracking it on like a Google Doc, and I'd be really proud of myself because I ran 4 or 5 miles that day. And I'd get on there, and she's run 5 or 6, whatever number I posted. She was always like just beating us a little bit more. And so it started to escalate and kind of got out of hand. And at one point, I found myself on a 10-mile run on a Saturday morning, having a good run, but with a lot of time on my hands to think. Um, and some of these conversations that you and I have had,
Mm.
were sinking in, and I was thinking about potential for the future, and an idea came to mind for a purpose of something that I want to do. So I eventually want to start another podcast. I don't know if it's going to be a segment of shared practices or if it's going to be a podcast unto itself, um, called "Dentists Doing Good" or something like that. Um, Featuring all the different ways that dentists give back, either locally,
Cool.
internationally,
That's
through
awesome.
nonprofits, through other things, and a whole flood of ideas came around this podcast, but in particular, a give came to mind, and we'll see, maybe this will shift, maybe this will change. I'm not publicly committing myself to anything, but right now, based on everything that you have taught me and that I've learned from you and the people that you've worked with, my current envisioned give, um is that we're going to sponsor dental students to go on humanitarian trips. So
Cool.
so I figure if you can get someone at the beginning of their career when they're in debt and they have no money to go out and serve and give and go on a trip,
Yeah. Think of the
then
long-term impact of that habit, that
th
culture.
then maybe they'll be on board for, continuing to serve rather than I think a lot of people get into the, "Yeah, I'd love to do something when I pay off my student loans or when I pay off my practice or
Yep.
when my kids are out of high school," or
Mhm.
the there's a lot of things they can,
Mhm.
point to in the future, but if you're not doing it
Mhm.
now, you're probably not gonna do it in 5 years, you're probably not gonna do it in 10 years.
Yep.
Um,
It's
and
true.
so that's really, really exciting for me.
I
Um,
love it. There's
be
I am so excited that you're going to do that because do you know a guy named Jordan Bauer? He's got a big beard.
I've heard the name, maybe I've seen him
Dr.
on
Jordan
Facebook.
Bauer. So this is one of our clients who opened a practice outside of Philadelphia. I remember we have this thing called a vision call. It's the first big planning moment. It's a multi-hour strategy call. It takes weeks to prepare for it. After the application process and after it looks like a good fit, it takes weeks to prepare for the vision call. On the vision call, I remember Jordan talking through some potential ideas for his give. And I remember him getting really passionate about it and saying, Jayme, I want to try to explain this whole thing. And he goes on, I can tell he's getting fired up. Like his emotions are getting higher and higher and higher. I can tell he's all about it. And then he said, and that's what I want to do, like overseas. And I want to do this. And it's going to be awesome. And I've done that in the past. I'm going to do it again. And then I could hear him like trailing off and like dropping off. But I know what you're probably going to say. He's telling me. He says, I know what you're probably going to say. You're probably going to say that I should wait until my practice gets up and running and is a little more stable to afford something like that. And I wanted to like clap, be like, no, 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 don't do that. That's the point.
Yeah.
If we give birth to your practice with this DNA, then it self-replicates. The goal is to make sure that your first day includes this. I want your entire reputation in your community to be wrapped around this concept. I want your prioritization for why you serve and the reason your team members come on board and the reason that your marketing activities are different because you stand for something great. And if we do that on day one and before day one, through the entire planning process of the startup MBA and whatever else, if we do that before this baby is born, then the DNA is implanted there so that it lives on with that. So it has its maximum potential to reach its most good, highest level of purpose. So don't sacrifice. I love the fact that you're thinking through like helping people develop those habits before they even get into practice ownership, because if we can do that together, then it'll just be a natural outpouring, a natural byproduct of what they actually stand for, of what actually matters to them way before their doors open. And then it's authentic. And that's when it's good. And by the way, this whole like give topic purpose discussion, I want to make it really clear. If you're like corporate dentistry and you're listening and you think this sounds like a cool marketing trick, like first of all, shame on you, like close the door and walk away. I don't want to talk to you. I don't want to hear from you. Like get over it. This isn't a gimmick. Like frankly, a gimmick is a lie, and a lie will not only hurt more people than it'll hurt more people than good, but it will actually hurt you in business. And
Well, your team will
probably
see right through it. If like that,
eventually it'll be
that's
sniffed out. Like your community is going to be
yeah,
like, wait, that I called and I asked, I said, hey, that's really cool about the thing you guys do, the nonprofit stuff you guys do. And then, but I talked to the team members and they were like, we do what? Hang on, wait, Sally, what do we do? We do that here? It is absolute like fraud, and it will ruin your reputation before helping the practice at all. So, but if on the other hand, if you want to give birth to this from a place of authenticity in a way that connects with your purpose, then I'm all for it. And I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but if corporate dentistry was listening, hopefully they're no longer.
right.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. And yeah, so all of this to say, no matter what point you are in your career, um, dental student, pre-owner, about to own, in practice ownership, it's never too late to say, okay, am I wasting my chance to be a dentist to do something better than just make some money?
Mm-hmm.
And and the sooner you figure that out, and no matter the pivot it takes, if you have to make changes, you have to switch things up in your life, the happier you're gonna be and the more fulfilled you're gonna be. There's all these side benefits that come from this,
Mm-hmm.
that once again, going back to the earlier conversation, opportunity versus opportunism of, if you are serving and doing these things, there's ways to share that with your community. There's ways to share that with your team that allow others to take part in this with you and support this cause with you and turn it into a movement, into something bigger than yourself. And it's not
Yeah.
about you. It's about the cause.
Yeah.
Um,
Love that.
so it's powerful, and whatever shift you need to make, it's worth it.
Can I? So you were asking about other stories. You mind if I read one to you? I
Okay,
uncovered it here.
this will be the
We
last
have
one. I have to do something here in about 12 minutes. So let's do this and we'll wrap it up.
This one's quick and easy. I love this guy. His name's Jared, and one of our startup MBA advisors was cheering him on. Middle of the pandemic, he'd only been open for a handful of months, and she says there's a lot of chatter. This is Stacy posting in this group of rapid accelerating startup clients. She said, Stacy says, there's a lot of chatter about this being a bad time for dentists, startups in particular. This is May 7th. So what's that? A month and a half ago.
Yep.
Startups in particular. This hasn't been the case for most of you. Jared, for example, Stacy goes on to say, had his two highest producing months so far
Mm.
during this time. Only seeing emergencies, mind you, over 55,000 from one month and close to 40,000 in another month, and over $20,000 so far this month on May 7th. Over $20,000 so far this month, and his team hasn't even fully started back yet. He did this,
Wow.
including everything with insurance. He officially opens back up, blah, blah, blah. These emergency patients are just included into now the loyal patients and his family. Amazing stuff, Jared. So can a startup perform well even in the most trying of circumstances? Well, yes and no. This is the reality of that doctor whose financial advisors told her her only viable option is bankruptcy. She opened around the same time as this guy, Jared. And then there's Jared, who literally has his two best months back to back in the middle of this mess. So I would say that startups can and are thriving in this, even in this economy. And my encouragement would be that when you focus on doing it the right way, particularly by focusing on practice where it belongs and sequestering it there, and profits before you open, and then purpose by tying it all together for something greater. I think by recognizing at least that much, hopefully that helps guide some people. And I talk quite a bit about those things at length with even more details at that startupdentistpodcast.com, a startup dentist podcast. It's pretty cool to go geeking out really deep on those topics and dispelling myths like, I need the best demographics report. Really? Are you sure? Because I can show you many examples, clients of ours who have like 25% worse demographics ratios, who are in the top 1% of startups in the country. Like
Mm,
really bad demographics, inordinate levels of competition,
mm,
and are crushing. Because it's not about the math. I mean, there's other courses out there where they say you have to fit everything into this pretty little spreadsheet. You have to make your operatories the smallest operatories on the planet. And if you make
mm.
them really, really, really small, then you'll be successful. Really? Are you sure? Are you sure?
Right.
So, yeah, so that helped give some ideas and some excitement for startups.
Absolutely. If someone is there's the podcast, what other ways can they reach out to you? And do you have we've had to cancel a lot of events and things like that. Is there any events on the horizon for you guys?
We have twice a year, we have a course called the Startup Practice Blueprint. We attempted to do one just now a week ago virtually, first time ever. It was a quiet invitation only. That went fairly well, but I still prefer them in person. There's so much more relationship building that can happen. So anyway, we have our Startup Practice Blueprint in-person edition, not virtual edition. In-person edition, come this October. You can look at startuppracticeblueprint.com if you want to check out the course. And then the other thing is, if this topic of the give process, if this, it's a defined process, and it literally takes an entire year before you open to begin planning out this give process. I only know because my team has literally helped do this hundreds of times all around the country. So I'm not trying to come up with fancy theories like, here, go try this idea, go hustle and grit your way to do a give. No. Like, do it the right way. So if you're interested in something like that, you could look up startupdentist.com. We created a documentary at startupdentist.com, a full video documentary. It almost feels like a Netflix 5-part episode thing. Or you can see a guy who we talked about a little earlier, the guy with the special needs process. You can see how he built his process out over the course of a year, and the wild levels of success that he had, being $1 million of collections in his first 12 months of practice ownership. So some pretty cool stuff with startups when it's done the right way. Those are some good resources.
Awesome. Thank you, Jamie, for coming on the show. Thank you for getting me fired up. Every single time we talk, I end up at the end of it fired up about purpose and about the give and how can I incorporate this better? How can I live this better across the board from shared practices to dental practices to my life and all of the above. And I'm very grateful for any opportunity we have to interact and create great content. So thanks for coming on the show.
Oh, it's awesome to be here again. I may not be distinguished, but I'm grateful to be here, hanging out with you and seeing what you're doing with multiple locations and even more time available for your practice in the very near future. And like all the things that you and George are doing, my goodness, serving young associate dentists and building that personal confidence for young docs to be able to grab control of their own future it is very inspiring to see. So thank you for allowing me to come close.
Oh, thank you. No, and, after air, I'm gonna see if I can get that contact of that dentist who's struggling from you, through our mutual
Mhm.
contact and see if we
Oh
can get
yeah.
her on Practice Underwater possibly.
Yeah, that'd be great. We'll make that connection in 5, 4, 3. Talk to you soon. Thanks,
Talk
everybody.
to you soon. We'll see ya. Okay, I really enjoyed talking with Jayme this time. Like I said, I put out some stuff there that I'm not holding myself to. I have the idea for another podcast that is going to be the charitable arm of shared practices, and I'm only allowed to have one side podcast at a time. Right now, I've got some other side podcast commitments, so I'm not able to move forward on this. But eventually, I really want to have a give to shared practices, and I'm really excited about that. And so I teased the fact that I think our give should be around humanitarian trips, which is the reason that I got into dentistry and really sealed the deal for me was a humanitarian trip I did to Guatemala before applying for dental school. And I there's so much potential to do good in dentistry and in particular in practice ownership. As a practice owner locally, internationally, by mentoring others, by coming up with new and better ways to serve the profession. And I'm working on the very back burner this other podcast and have some other ideas. But it's something I'm just as excited about this as I was about shared practices in the first place. So, anyways, as you know, I strongly urge and recommend anyone considering a startup, reach out to Jayme, talk with him and his team, see what they have to offer. And if you're on the fence about this, go back and listen to that episode of on the pursuit or not the pursuit of ownership on practice underwater where there was that guy struggling a few months into his startup and basically on the verge of going under and then did go under when his associateship fired him, who took breakaway, who was trying to do all of these things, but he was on his own and he didn't execute. So Jayme and his team will 100% help you execute your startup in the right way. So please, please, please reach out to him if that's in your future. But we will talk with you next time on the Shared Practices podcast.